have is just like really like a computer, like we downloaded everything in a computer. Everything is there for us to access if we want to, if we want to get at it. Much of it is useful and very critical information. And then the other area is behavior and how we function. We talked about this, like being on autopilot, and these kinds of things as far as having the conscious mind step out of the way. This is on page 3, if you're wondering, or actually page 2, if you're wondering where it's at. And when we think in terms of the body, like I said, an athlete or a musician, if the thinking aspect steps out of the way, then we're much better off. We can just kind of flow or be in the zone or whatever we want to call it. And so in meditation, we let the conscious mind subside. We let it become very still, and then we feel like our meditation is getting good, because what we're allowing is the subconscious to kind of bubble up for us, to be there in the form of insight. Some of the stuff we already covered, I'm looking at. Again, when we're walking, we have absolutely no trouble walking. When we're conscious of it, like a child, we're stumbling all over and we're bumping into stuff. But if we're just simply walking, we don't really give it any consideration unless there's a problem. Like if we're getting older, or we have a sore knee, or even a pebble in the shoe. Just a pebble in the shoe brings our consciousness to the act of walking because of the discomfort, and then it's hard for us to walk. And it could be true with any of these things, is when the consciousness is kind of triggered and gets involved. So we can ask ourselves, how much of our behavior, for example, is conscious. And when I first got introduced to anatta, or non-self, it was very it was spoken of quite a bit at that time. And I think about it often. It's like when we get out of bed in the morning, who's actually getting out of bed? Because we just get out of bed. A lot of times there's a calling. If we have time, we lay there, and all of a sudden we might have to use the restroom. And we don't consciously get out of bed. We don't grab this, and then I'm going to put my foot down, and then this foot down, and I'm going to stand. None of that. We get out of bed with not even thinking about it. Just allowing the subconscious to do its thing. First thing in the morning. And then, of course, like Sigmund Freud, when he was talking about, speaking of sleeping in bed, but he thought his idea of the subconscious was that it's affecting, it's what our dreams are, completely what our dreams are, and it's very metaphoric and works with images a lot. We'll address that in a second here. And then change. We have to look at change too, particularly if we're trying to change a bad habit, for example, or trying to change our view on something. When we think in terms of changing something, we say, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. But 5 minutes later, we're doing it again, in many cases. Or what that is really saying is that that communication between the consciousness and the subconsciousness isn't very good. And we could actually say that meditation is really a intervention with the subconscious in many ways. If we, not that we're carrying on a discussion with ourselves or anything like that, but when it comes to mindfulness and being mindful of our thoughts, and what kind of thoughts are we having all day long? It's very hard to see that until we sit in meditation. And that's why we say that the thoughts settle down, the consciousness settles down, or the cognition, and then we're able to see these thoughts in a mindful way. It's like sitting on the edge of the river and watching these things go by. And it's how we relate to that and how we communicate with that. And so when we're mindful, we're not to be judgmental, because in that judgment, we would say that this is right or this is wrong. That's a wrong thought, which is the subconscious would probably laugh at that if it had a sense of humor, that it's a wrong thought. But it's counterproductive to the way we should be communicating with the subconscious. I used an example the other day about the heater coils in the engine room of a ship, and the captain sends down a signal, through his microphone, and says, "Do not throw gasoline on the heater coils of the engine, because it's going to explode," right? And then somebody says, "What did he say?" He said, "I think he said throw gasoline on the heater coils of the engine." Oh, okay. The subconscious, the subconscious dudes they in other words, they didn't get the right signal. And so we have to be, it helps to be very, very clear, and this is where mindfulness and meditation comes in, very, very clear with how we see ourselves in the world and how we see the world. So a clearer order would be something actually like a sign that you would see in the engine room. Keep all flammable liquids within 100 yards or 100 feet, from the heater coils, or this is keep all flammables out of this room, period. And so that there's no intention or no miscommunication. We have to be very, very clear. So when it comes to change and changing negative habits, sometimes we can, we hear of situations like in hypnotherapy, for example. You hear somebody having one session, they've been smoking for 30 years, and they had one session, and they completely stop smoking. And so in many cases, the therapist got kind of lucky. They hit on something, and I believe this can happen. I've heard it happening quite often. But they hit on something that worked, for the subconscious mind of that smoker, of that client. And but in many cases, it has to be done again and again to really get into. Depends on the quality of the hypnotherapist too. But to get into that area where that subconscious is triggered. And that's why in meditation, although it's very subtle, we do it again and again and again, but it has much more staying power. And it's so subtle that we seldom notice the difference, but somebody else in our lives will say, "Yeah, you're acting different. You must be meditating," or something like that. Somebody at work might notice something different. I think it was just yesterday, this girl said that when she misses a day of meditation, I think it was her daughter, and she could have been joking a little bit, but I don't think she was trying to be funny. But she said that when she misses a day of meditation, her daughter can tell, so it must have a real pronounced effect on her somehow. And so it's real subtle, because we're having that communication, a very subtle communication with the subconscious, again and again. So change, I think any kind of change that we're going to make, such as habits, habitual kind of things has to be a communication with the subconscious mind, because that's where all these behaviors come from. Learned behaviors, learned emotions, all that learning that we do is stored within the subconscious. Triggers, something comes up and we feel like doing that negative habit, or we feel, whatever it might be. We have triggers for good things too, We might see a statue of a Buddha and just, have this feeling of loving kindness or something, within us. We might go outside and walk the dog, for example, and we've been doing that for 10 years and having a cigarette while we walk the dog and then every time we think of walking the dog, we want to have a cigarette. That kind of trigger, but it's all in the subconscious mind. It just comes up. Because usually very subtly, we feel it in sensations in the body. So the subconscious can store all of this stuff in different areas too. Neurons. Keep an eye on the clock here. So there's a lot of the stuff I gave you. There's quite a few sheets in this particular class, and it's just information that I wanted to share with you before we're done, before we're done with this module, and you get certified and you're on your way. There's 8 people being certified this time around. Yeah. If they get the test in, yeah. Yeah. That's part of the communication with the subconscious, taking tests and stuff. So there's some areas we could touch on here. We can just kind of discuss these, but starting on page 5 of 8, this is a list of what I call structures that uses the subconscious and helps to provide an understanding of the correlation between subconsciousness, meditation, and mindfulness, and based on these practices. So we'll just kind of go through these, kind of flow through these, because there's 14 of them. The subconscious stores our memories, and we kind of talked about that already, actually. When these memories are freed up, it's actually the subconscious that was holding them, storing them, categorizing them, and then somehow they're brought up to our conscious memory, and it can happen in many, many different ways. We can get slapped and have a memory of an ex-wife slapping us or something like that, or we can have a certain tap on the shoulder, that the memory of somebody, doing that, or these childhood memories can come up for different things, not only bodily things, but words too, in these different kinds of triggers. So subconscious stores all these different memories that we have, good and bad, and they might be memories that don't mean anything to us as well, and they just come up. Number 2, the subconscious organizes all of these memories, and I just addressed that. We think in terms of like from the Buddhist standpoint, we see pleasant and unpleasant feelings that arise from seeing and smelling and touching and hearing different things. And so when there's something unpleasant to us from seeing it, that might not be unpleasant to somebody else. We could be walking down the street and hear something. It might be pleasant to us, but the person that we're with thinks it's unpleasant. We might hear a bird in the distance that sounds like singing to us, and our friend or partner might think it's screeching and bother their ears. It's from from these past memories based on our perception, our senses, seeing, smelling, hearing, touching, tasting. If that wasn't so, it would be a very, very simple world. There would be one kind of grocery store, one price, everybody would eat the same food, and everything would be probably black and white, because that's how we would register it, It would be completely different. Number 3, our emotions are stored within the subconscious. So we're talking about storing the memories, organizing the memories, and storing the memories and emotions within us. Emotions are triggered just like thoughts. And number 4 on page 6, the subconscious can hide memories as unresolved negative emotions, and that's quite common in the area of helping people and working with people, where they have these things that there's difficulties that they have, and then we realize through working with them that it was a stored memory or a negative emotion that was stored within the body, and oftentimes people will have aches and pains because of that. And usually, we could almost bet that if there's a tension in the muscles or tension in some area of the body, it's from this stored emotion that the subconscious is storing for us. Negative emotions, negative memories. Number 5, the subconscious mind regresses or represses emotions for protection. So we might feel that the subconscious is very wise, and feels like if there was something released maybe too fast or too sudden, or released period, that it could cause problems for us mentally or psychologically. Kind of goes back to the story about Shine, that pianist, that all of a sudden this stuff came forward for him and he short-circuited. The subconscious couldn't hold on to it anymore. Number 7, the subconscious runs the body. We talked about that, how we think we might move an arm, we might scratch ourselves or rub our eyes or something, and it's the subconscious mind that is doing all of that. We're not consciously doing it. That's why we see a meditator, we might ask people not to move whatsoever, and somebody moves, they're not even thinking about it, because they're so used to doing something like scratching, feeling an itch or something. I had somebody in this room that would come quite often, and I would ring the bell and they would reach for their water bottle and drink their water. It was a habitual thing. They didn't even know that they were doing it. I asked them about it after witnessing it for about quite a few months, and they had no idea that they were even doing it. Ring the bell, reach underneath, drink the water, put it back down, and then start meditating. All subconscious. Number 8, the subconscious has the job of preserving and protecting the body. It's like peripheral vision. When we see something coming out of the side of us, the instinct, intuition, which is the subconscious, we have reactions. If there's a bus coming down the road and we're walking down the street, even though we're looking forward, we can sense that bus bearing down on us, at 60 miles an hour. Unless we're, if we're under the influence or something like that, the subconscious mind is very, very, very affected, as well as the conscious mind. But these parts of the mind are very, very affected by substances, that throw us off, such as alcohol and drugs, that kind of thing. Number 9, the subconscious mind takes directions and follows orders. The simile or the analogy of the cook taking orders from the waitress. and the poor customer that has to do this again and again until it's done right. Otherwise, they're not going to get their food. Is a good example in that area. You can kind of read over these when you get a chance to. Number 10, the subconscious maintains and filters all sensory perceptions. Everything that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. The subconscious, thankfully, gathers that information and stores that, maintains that for us. It stores and distributes energy. So if we're fatigued, it's the subconscious mind, for some reason, not giving us the energy that we need. If we're over-energized and we can't sleep, it's the subconscious mind that is doing that. So if we're off in some way, it's the subconscious mind. We can feel sluggish, or we can feel very vibrant and healthy. And it's the energy level that is distributed by the subconscious. Number 12, the subconscious allows us to respond to instinct and tuition. We kind of talked about that a little bit. The reactions that we have, we hear stories about people driving down the highway and they see an accident on the side of the road. The car is flipped over, and there's a child underneath, and they have to push the car to get the child out. You ever hear those things? And somehow they muster up, even the mother musters up enough strength to push the car in order for somebody else to pull the child out from underneath it, and to actually lift the car. So the strength comes from somewhere. It comes from the subconscious mind. And oftentimes there's no fear involved when these things happen. The response, instinct, intuition is spontaneous, it's present, just like mindfulness. The subconscious takes over, and everything is taken care of very cleanly, very, very expertly, we could say. And then afterwards, these other emotions can kick in, like fear and bewilderment, you know. Sometimes people will do amazing things and they just break down. They'll think about what they did, the consciousness will kick in, and they break down in tears and just, wow, can't believe what happened, you know, that kind of thing. Number 13, lucky 13, the subconscious works in metaphors and is symbolic. That's very much a part of working with somebody with dream analogy, hypnotherapy. When we're dreaming at night ourselves, we see these images. Oftentimes there's very few words spoken, but we see all these different images and metaphors. The American Indians knew this, and they did all of their communication through images and metaphors, and they spirit animals, you know, images for themselves. Very symbolic. And then number 14, the subconscious takes everything personally. And the analogy there is really seeing everything like an image. So when we see something that we like in somebody, we think consciously that, oh, I like this in that person, I like that. But what we're seeing, the subconscious is taking that and seeing it's a reflection of what we want to see, or what we do see in ourselves, or what we want to see in ourselves. So it's like pointing at somebody, and we have one finger pointing at the person or the thing, and we have three fingers pointing at us. You know, it's like we're actually pointing at us. Everything's a mirror image. Everything's a reflection of what we want to see. So our world is actually a reflection of us. Not only our houses and our friends and everything in our immediate world as far as material things, but how we think of things, how we think of a person. If we see negative things in a person and we're pointing at them, we're pointing at ourselves because of That's what we see in ourselves. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to recognize it at all. We have to be able to experience things and to understand them in order for them, even for us, them to register in our minds. Understand what I'm saying? Okay. Let's take a short little break, and then we'll move on to the next segment. Okay?